Listen, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in my 15 years with the Galactic Council. Planets that rain diamonds, stars that sing opera, a species that reproduces by arguing until they split in half from pure stubbornness. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the absolute circus that was the Void Rift incident. My name is Commander Vex Thornblade, and yes, I know that sounds like I picked it from a rejected video game character list. Blame my parents and their obsession with old Earth fantasy novels. I'm the human liaison at Research Station Kepler 442, which sounds impressive until you realize it basically means I'm the guy who translates when the aliens start arguing in 17 different languages simultaneously. The Void Rift showed up 3 months ago, right on our cosmic doorstep. One day, normal space. Next day, boom. There's this swirling purple and black tear in reality about 50 meters across, just hanging there like a particularly aggressive bruise on the universe's face. Beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. The kind of thing that makes you wonder if existence comes with a warranty. Now, you'd think the Galactic Council, with its 13-member species and combined intelligence that supposedly spans millions of years of evolution, would handle this with grace and efficiency. You'd be wrong. You'd be so magnificently wrong that wrongness itself would feel inadequate to describe your wrongness. First, they sent in a probe. Standard stuff. The probe got within 10 meters of the rift and just disintegrated. Not exploded, not crushed, just stopped existing like someone hit the delete button on reality. Okay, weird. But let's try again with better shielding, right? They sent 47 more probes. 47. Each one more expensive and sophisticated than the last. Each one met the same fate. Poof, gone. Erased from existence faster than my paycheck disappears on rent day. Enter Professor Quilnax the Magnificent. And yes, he actually insists on the magnificent part. He's a Slorvian, which means he looks like someone crossed a slug with a peacock and gave it 4 eyeballs and an ego the size of a small moon. He arrived at the station with 16 assistants, 43 degrees from various universities, and absolutely zero sense of humor. Commander Thornblade, he'd announced, oozing into the observation deck. I have been summoned to solve this simple mystery that has somehow eluded the local researchers. His voice had this wet, gurgling quality that made every word sound like it was drowning. I'd been watching another probe die in real time. Oh good, you're here. Maybe you can explain why that 50 million credit scanner just became the universe's most expensive special effect. He'd waved one of his 14 appendages dismissively. Clearly insufficient quantum harmonization. I shall have this resolved by week's end. That was 12 weeks ago. Since then, I've watched the Galactic Council throw money at this thing like they're trying to bribe physics itself. Quantum entanglement probes, dimensional phase shifters, something called a chronospatial resonance analyzer that cost more than my entire homeworld's GDP, and lasted approximately 4 seconds before the rift ate it. The best part? Every single time something failed, Professor Quilnax would spend 3 hours explaining why it wasn't his fault. The probe wasn't calibrated correctly. The rift shifted frequencies. Mercury was in retrograde, probably. The excuses were almost more entertaining than the failures. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there with my coffee, watching billions of credits get flushed into a cosmic toilet, taking notes like I'm at the galaxy's most expensive magic show. My reports back to Earth basically read like comedy scripts at this point. The political pressure was mounting too. The Galactic Council was getting nervous. They'd set up a perimeter around the rift, evacuated nearby shipping lanes, and started having emergency sessions every other day. 13 species, all convinced their solution was the right one, all talking over each other in a cacophony that made my translator implant want to file for early retirement. And the rift? It just sat there, swirling, waiting, probably laughing at us if interdimensional spatial anomalies can laugh. Which, given everything else I've seen, wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. The council meeting that changed everything happened on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because that's the day the station serves something the aliens call nutrition paste, and I call institutional depression in food form. I'd skipped lunch, which meant I was cranky, hungry, and had exactly 0 patience left for theatrical alien nonsense. The observation deck had been converted into a makeshift war room, and I do mean war room because Admiral Curse, the Kittelax military representative, had apparently decided this called for his presence. Imagine a praying mantis had a baby with a tank, gave it 6 arms, and taught it to growl. That's cursed. He doesn't walk into rooms, he invades them. The solution is obvious. Cursed was clicking, his mandibles snapping with each word. We destroy it, maximum firepower, photon torpedoes, antimatter missiles, everything. Ambassador Fleen, who looked like someone had given sentience to a jellyfish made of anxiety, was pulsating different colors of distress. And if that makes it worse? What if it's a weapon? What if someone is watching to see how we react? What if this is a test and we're failing? Everything is not a conspiracy, Fleen, I muttered, but nobody heard me because Professor Quillnax had oozed up to his podium. Colleagues, please. Violence and paranoia will solve nothing. He adjusted all 4 of his eyes to look maximally condescending. I have developed a new approach. We shall construct a probe using inverse quantum fluctuation matrices combined with dimensional stabilizers, all wrapped in a shell of compressed neutronium and powered by a miniature black hole. I raised my hand. Everyone ignored me. The cost, Quillnax continued, would be approximately 900 billion credits. However, I am confident this will penetrate the anomaly. I raised my hand higher. Still nothing. Construction time would be 6 months, but science cannot be rushed. Or, I said loudly, standing up, and hear me out here, we could just throw a rock at it. The room went silent. You know that kind of silence where you can actually hear the air conditioning? That kind. Quillnax slowly rotated his entire body to face me. I beg your pardon? A rock, like from outside. Simple, unpowered, natural object. We throw it at the rift, see what happens. Admiral Kirst's mandibles stopped mid-click. Ambassador Fleen stopped pulsating entirely, which I didn't know was possible. 17 other species representatives just stared at me like I'd suggested we all strip naked and sing show tunes. Professor Quillnax's eye stalks quivered with what I could only assume was rage. Commander Thornblade, I have 43 degrees. I have spent 800 years studying spatial anomalies. I have written over 9,000 papers on quantum mechanics. And you, a human who has been alive for barely 3 decades, whose species only achieved faster than light travel 200 years ago, think the solution to this unprecedented cosmic mystery is to throw a rock at it? I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds dumb, but yeah, basically. This is why humans should not be allowed in scientific discussions, Quillnax gurgled. Your primitive, simplistic thinking is an insult to every researcher in this room. I shrugged. Look, I've been watching you guys throw increasingly complicated and expensive stuff at this thing for 3 months. Every single piece of advanced technology gets destroyed. Every scanner, every AI-controlled probe, every quantum whatever gets eaten. But has anyone tried something that isn't complicated? Something that isn't powered? Something that's just, I don't know, a thing? The rock would be destroyed instantly. Ambassador Fleen pulsed, though he sounded uncertain. Probably, I agreed, but it would cost exactly 0 credits to find out. And we could do it right now instead of waiting 6 months and 900 billion credits for Professor Magnificent's black hole Rube Goldberg machine. Kirst's mandibles started clicking again, faster this time. The human makes a point, not a good point, but a point. This is absurd, Quillnax sputtered. Ridiculous. Anti-intellectual. The scientific method demands proper hypothesis, testing, peer review. The scientific method also demands observation, I interrupted. And I've observed that everything complex fails. So let's try something simple. If I'm wrong, you can spend the next decade reminding me about it. If I'm right, we save 900 billion credits in 6 months. There was a long pause. Various aliens exchanged glances in their species-specific ways. Some with eyes, some with antenna movements, one by changing the scent they were emitting. Finally, the council chair, an ancient, turtle-like being named Magistrate Thum, who mostly slept through meetings, opened one eye. Let the human throw his rock. It will fail, and then we can proceed with serious solutions. Professor Quillnax looked like he wanted to argue more, but even he couldn't really justify blocking a zero-cost experiment. Fine, he gurgled. But when this fails spectacularly, I expect a formal apology from Commander Thornblade in writing, submitted to all 13 Council worlds, acknowledging the superiority of proper scientific methodology. Deal, I said, trying not to smile. As the meeting dispersed, I could hear the whispers and clicks and gurgles of various aliens muttering about primitive human logic and waste of time, and at least it will be quick. I just needed to find a good rock. The station had a small biodome on level 7, one of those artificial nature preserves meant to keep the oxygen-breathing species from going insane in deep space. It had real dirt, real plants, and most importantly for my purposes, real rocks. I picked a good one. Nothing special, just a chunk of granite about the size of my fist, smooth from the artificial stream, probably weighing about half a kilo. Perfect throwing weight. The kind of rock that humanity had been throwing at problems for about 2 million years. Of course, the aliens couldn't let it be that simple. By the time I got back to the observation deck, Professor Quilnax had assembled a team of technicians who had apparently decided that my rock needed monitoring equipment. We cannot simply throw an untracked object into a spatial anomaly, Quilnax explained as one of his assistants tried to attach a microsensor to my rock. How will we gather data? By watching it with our eyes, I suggested. Insufficient. We need quantum readings, dimensional displacement measurements, temporal variance analysis. You want to attach electronics to the rock I'm throwing at the rift that destroys electronics? Quilnax paused. All 4 eyes blinked in sequence. That is, the data collection would last exactly as long as every other electronic thing you've sent near it. I held up the rock. Look, this is supposed to be the simple solution. If we strap a computer to it, it stops being simple. Admiral Kirst, who'd shown up to watch the inevitable failure, clicked in what I'd learned was his version of a laugh. The human is correct, let him throw his primitive projectile. So there I was, standing in the airlock closest to the rift, holding a rock surrounded by the galaxy's greatest scientific minds who were all convinced I was about to look stupid. The rift swirled about 30 meters away, visible through the reinforced windows, doing its usual purple and black cosmic horror impression. Whenever you're ready, Commander, Quilnax said over the comm, his voice dripping with smug anticipation. I cycled the outer airlock door. The vacuum of space met me with its usual silent indifference. The rock felt solid in my gloved hand, real in a way that all the quantum probes and dimensional scanners hadn't been. For humanity, I muttered, and for everyone who ever solved a problem by hitting it with something. I threw the rock. Now, I'm not going to pretend I have perfect aim in zero gravity while wearing a spacesuit. The throw was decent, not great. The rock tumbled end over end, moving at maybe 10 meters per second, heading straight for the rift. It reached the 10-meter mark where every probe had disintegrated. Nothing happened. 8 meters. Still nothing. 5 meters. The rock kept going. Wait, I heard someone say over the comm. Might have been Ambassador Fleen. 3 meters. Is it still there? That was definitely Fleen. 1 meter. And then the rock touched the rift surface and passed through. Just slipped right in like it was diving into water. No explosion, no disintegration, no cosmic light show. It just went through and disappeared from view. The comm channel erupted into chaos. Impossible. Rewind the footage. Check the sensors. The rock survived. The primitive rock survived. I pulled myself back into the airlock and cycled through. By the time I got to the observation deck, it looked like someone had kicked an anthill made of alien scientists. Everyone was shouting, gesticulating, pulsing different colors or emitting various confused scents. Professor Quilnax was staring at his screens, all 4 eyes wide. This makes no sense. The rock had no shielding, no quantum stabilization, no dimensional anchoring. It should have been destroyed instantly. But it wasn't, I pointed out helpfully. It wasn't, he repeated, sounding dazed. Admiral Krarst was the first to put it together. The rift destroys complex technology. The rock had no technology. Therefore, the rock survived. That's too simple. Ambassador Fleen pulsed. There must be more to it. A hidden variable. An unknown factor. Or, I said, it really is that simple. Maybe the rift only destroys things that are powered, things with AI, with computers, with energy signatures. Maybe it's not about strength or shielding. Maybe it's about complexity. The room went quiet again. We should test this hypothesis, Magistrate Thum said, suddenly alert. Send through other simple objects, unpowered material samples. And just like that, my simple solution became a complex testing protocol. Over the next 3 days, they shot everything through that rift. Dead computers, unpowered probes, pieces of metal, more rocks, water, a sandwich that someone had left in the break room. Everything unpowered went through fine. Everything with so much as a battery got vaporized. Professor Quillnax tried to salvage his dignity by proposing they send a simplified advanced probe, which was just a probe with most of its systems turned off. It lasted 5 seconds before the rift ate it anyway. Apparently, turned off wasn't simple enough. So the solution, I said, watching another simplified probe die, is to send something that was never complicated in the first place. Quillnax didn't respond. He was too busy having what I assumed was an existential crisis about rock-based physics. That's when I had my terrible, wonderful, absolutely insane idea. The meeting started badly and went downhill from there. Absolutely not, Professor Quillnax said, all 4 eyes focused on me with laser intensity. I forbid it. You can't forbid me from doing anything. You're a researcher, not my commanding officer. Then I will have you declared mentally incompetent and confined to quarters for your own safety. I looked around the conference table. I'm going through the rift. I'm organic, unpowered, and I fit the exact pattern we've observed. It's the logical next step. Admiral Kirst's mandibles were clicking rapidly. The human is either the bravest creature I've ever met or the dumbest, possibly both. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. Ambassador Fleen was cycling through colors so fast he looked like a disco ball. But what if you die? What if there's something on the other side? What if the rift destroys organic matter but just takes longer? What if... Fleen, buddy, if I worried about every what if, I'd never get out of bed in the morning. Magistrate Thum had both eyes open now, which was apparently a big deal. Commander Thornblade, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we cannot risk a council member on an untested theory. It's not untested. We've tested it with rocks and sandwiches. I'm just a really complicated sandwich when you think about it. That is not reassuring, Quillnax gurgled. Look, I said, standing up and pacing. We've established that simple, unpowered objects pass through. Every piece of technology fails. I'm made of meat and water. No implants except my translator, which I'll leave behind. No equipment except maybe a notepad and pen. I'm basically a really anxious rock that can take notes. The liability alone, Quillnax started. I'll sign whatever waiver you want. I volunteer. Full consent. Nobody forced me. If I die, it's my own stupid fault. The room erupted into arguments in 7 different languages. My translator implant was having a seizure trying to keep up. The general consensus seemed to be that I was insane. This was a terrible idea, and they couldn't actually stop me, but they really wanted to. After 2 hours of debate, Magistrate Thum raised a flipper. The human is within his rights to volunteer. We cannot stop him. However, we will establish safety protocols. Thank you, I said. You will take a tethered line. If you do not return in 10 minutes, we will pull you back. That seems reasonable. And, Quillnax added grudgingly, you will take basic documentation supplies. If you insist on this suicide mission, at least gather data. That's how I ended up in the prep room, stripping off everything technological. My translator implant went in a container, my comm device, my watch. Even my uniform had smart fibers, so I changed into a basic cotton outfit that made me look like I was heading to a yoga class rather than exploring a cosmic anomaly. What I kept? A notebook, a pen, my own eyeballs, my questionable decision-making skills. Admiral Kirst showed up as I was doing final checks. Human, this is foolish. Yeah, I know. But it is the kind of foolishness that wins battles. He extended one of his blade arms, and what I'd learned was a Kittilax salute. If you survive, I will personally recommend you for commendation. If you die, I will ensure your species remembers you as brave rather than stupid. That's surprisingly touching. Do not make me regret saying it. The walk to the airlock felt longer than it should have. Every alien I passed stopped to stare. Some wished me luck. Some just looked at me like I was already dead. Professor Quillnax met me at the airlock door, holding the tether line. For the record, he gurgled quietly, I think you are making a terrible mistake. Noted. But I also think... He paused, eye stalks twitching. I also think that perhaps we have overcomplicated things. If you are right, and you somehow survive, I will never hear the end of it. Probably not, I agreed. And if you die, I will feel terrible. Also noted. He attached the tether to my waist. It was a simple rope, no electronics, just woven synthetic fiber. 10 minutes, Commander. After that, we pull you back regardless of what we see. I nodded and stepped into the airlock. Through the inner door. Cycle the atmosphere. Outer door opens. And there it was, the void rift, swirling and beautiful, and probably deadly. 30 meters away, and waiting. I could see the observation deck windows filled with alien faces, all watching, probably taking bets on whether I'd explode, implode, or just disappear. The tether played out behind me as I pushed off, floating toward the rift. No turning back now. No safety net except a rope and hope. 20 meters, 15, 10. This was the point where the probes died. I kept going. 5 meters. I could feel something now, a tingling sensation like static electricity dancing across my skin. 3 meters. Okay, universe, I muttered. Please don't kill me. That would be really inconvenient. 1 meter. The rift's surface looked like liquid space, if space could be liquid. Purple and black and somehow deeper than anything should be. I reached out and touched it, and then I fell through. The first thing I noticed was that I wasn't dead, which was already ahead of my expectations. The second thing I noticed was that I was standing on something solid, which was weird because I'd been floating in space a moment ago. The third thing I noticed was that I was in what looked like a cosmic waiting room. I'm not kidding. The space inside the rift was maybe 50 meters across, shaped like a sphere, with a floor that felt solid, but looked like starlight. The walls, if you could call them that, were the same purple-black swirl as the rift's exterior, but calmer somehow, less aggressive. The whole place had the vibe of an airport terminal at 3 a.m., empty and liminal and slightly unsettling. And floating around me in various states of shutdown were all the probes. Every single probe that the Galactic Council had sent into the rift was here, just drifting in zero-G hibernation. Quantum scanners, dimensional analyzers, Admiral Curset's attempted photon torpedo, which thankfully hadn't detonated, even Professor Quillnax's 50 million credit scanner that had died on day 1. All here, all intact, all completely dormant. Okay, I said to the empty space, my voice sounding strange without air to carry it properly. Wait, how was I hearing my own voice? How was I breathing? I looked down. I was still breathing normally. No vacuum effects, no decompression. The space inside the rift had atmosphere, or at least something my lungs accepted as atmosphere. That's new, I muttered, pulling out my notebook and pen. I started taking notes because apparently 3 months of watching alien scientists had rubbed off on me. Interior of rift contains breathable atmosphere. Gravity present approximately Earth standard. All destroyed probes actually intact but non-functional. Hypothesis: rift doesn't destroy technology, it deactivates it. I pushed myself over to the nearest probe and examined it. Nothing obviously broken. No scorch marks, no damage. It just looked asleep. I tried pressing what I assumed was a power button. Nothing happened. The probe's AI wasn't dead, it was just off, and apparently, it wasn't turning back on. Interesting. I floated through the collection of dead technology, taking notes like a particularly nerdy ghost. The photon torpedo was especially concerning because it was definitely still armed, just not actively exploding, which seemed like a temporary condition I didn't want to test. That's when I noticed the symbol. It was on the far wall, if walls were a thing here, carved or burned or somehow etched into the swirling energy. Not written in any language I recognized, but it wasn't trying to be language. It was a pictogram, the kind of universal symbol that transcends words. It showed a circle with a dot in the center. Simple, clear. Then an arrow pointing to a more complex circle with circuit-like patterns, and then a big X through the complex circle. Below that, another image. The simple circle with a dot, an arrow, and a check mark. "Oh," I said, understanding clicking into place. "Oh, you magnificent bastard." The rift wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a cosmic mystery. It wasn't even particularly dangerous. It was a filter, a test, an intelligence check, but not the kind that the aliens had been thinking about. The simple translation: complex things, no. Simple things, yes. But why? I looked around the chamber again, at all the dormant AI-controlled probes, at the sophisticated technology rendered useless. What was the point? Then I noticed something else. In the exact center of the sphere, there was a small platform, and on that platform was something that looked like a control panel, except it wasn't electronic. It was mechanical. Carved stone buttons, each one labeled with the same kind of pictograms. I floated over to it, notebook in hand. The pictograms showed various images, circles that might represent planets or stations, arrows indicating direction, and what looked like a countdown or timer symbol. "This is ancient," I whispered. "Like really ancient. Someone built this a long time ago." One of the buttons had an image that looked like an exit symbol, the universal "this way out" that apparently transcended civilizations. I looked at it, looked at my tether leading back to the rift entrance, and made a decision. I pressed the button. Nothing dramatic happened. No explosion, no alarm, no cosmic revelation. The rift's interior just pulsed once, gently, like it was acknowledging the input. But I felt something change, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. I checked my notebook, looked around one more time, and decided I'd push my luck far enough. Time to go home and blow some minds with my primitive note-taking technology. The swim back to the rift entrance was easier than I expected. The tether had stayed taut, which meant the aliens hadn't panicked and pulled me out yet. I was definitely under the 10-minute mark, probably barely 5 minutes in. I reached the rift's interior surface, took a breath, and pushed through. Reality inverted. My stomach did a flip. And suddenly I was back in normal space, floating outside the rift, staring at 17 different alien species who looked like they'd seen a ghost. My comm crackled to life as I grabbed my translator implant from the recovery team. "Commander Thornblade, you are alive." "I am," I confirmed, "and you're all going to want to hear this." The debriefing room was packed to capacity and beyond. Every species representative, every researcher, every technician who could squeeze into the space had shown up. They'd even set up a live feed to the Galactic Council chambers because apparently, throwing a rock and not dying had made me temporarily famous. Professor Quillnax was in the front row, all 4 eyes locked on me with an intensity that was frankly unsettling. Admiral Kirst stood in the back, mandibles still. Even Magistrate Thum had both eyes open and his neck extended, paying full attention. I stood at the podium with my notebook, feeling like I was giving the universe's weirdest book report. "So," I began, "the good news is the Void Rift isn't trying to kill us. The bad news is we've been massively overthinking it for 3 months. I pulled up the photos I'd sketched of the pictograms. The Rift is a filter. It was designed by someone, probably a very long time ago, to screen out artificial intelligence and complex technology. Everything you sent in is still there, intact but dormant. It didn't destroy your probes, it just turned them off." "But why?" Ambassador Fleen pulsed. "What's the purpose?" "My best guess? Quarantine protocol, or maybe an intelligence test, but not the kind we thought. It's testing whether a civilization is capable of simple, direct action instead of overcomplicated solutions. The pictograms inside basically say complicated things bad, simple things good." Professor Quillnax's eye stalks were quivering. "That's absurd. Why would anyone design a spatial anomaly just to filter out technology? Why would anyone design anything?" I shrugged. Maybe whoever made it was dealing with a rogue AI problem. Maybe they wanted to ensure only organic beings could access whatever's on the other side. Maybe they just really hated complicated solutions. The point is, the rift responds to simplicity. Magistrate Thum leaned forward. And the control panel you mentioned? Mechanical, stone-based, probably centuries old at minimum. I pressed what looked like an acknowledgement button. No idea what it actually did, but the rift seemed to accept it. I flipped through my notes. Here's the thing that should embarrass us all. The solution to this mystery was literally carved into the wall in pictures simple enough for a child to understand. But we were too busy trying to crack it with quantum mechanics to look for the instruction manual. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Kirst started clicking. It took me a second to realize he was laughing. The human is correct. We brought our most sophisticated technology to solve a problem specifically designed to reject sophisticated technology. We are idiots. I wouldn't say idiots, I offered. I would. Kirst clicked. We are military-grade idiots. The human threw a rock and walked through a spatial anomaly that we spent 3 months and billions of credits failing to understand. This will be taught in Kittilak's military academies as an example of tactical stupidity. Professor Quilnax looked like he wanted to argue, but his eye stalks just drooped. I spent 900 billion credits on a probe design that was inherently unable to succeed, because it was too advanced. On the bright side, I said, all your probes are recoverable. Just need to send someone in to tow them out. Someone organic and unpowered, Ambassador Fleen added. Someone simple. Exactly. Magistrate Thum cleared his throat. Commander Thornblade, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize for dismissing your suggestion. Your approach, while unorthodox, proved effective. Thanks, but honestly, I just got lucky that I was too primitive to overthink it. The official report, when it was published 3 weeks later, was a masterpiece of diplomatic language. It carefully documented the unconventional breakthrough utilizing organic reconnaissance protocols, and praised the innovative application of simplified methodology. Nowhere in the 16,000-word report did it mention the words rock or just walked through it. The Galactic Council couldn't quite bring themselves to admit that their solution had been that dumb simple. Professor Quilnax, to his credit, did eventually apologize, though he phrased it as acknowledging the value of alternative perspectives in scientific methodology. He never said I was right exactly, but he stopped calling humans primitive, which I counted as a win. The rift became a minor tourist attraction after they determined it was safe. They set up viewing platforms, wrote informational pamphlets, and installed a plaque that read, Site of First Successful Rift Traversal, a testament to cross-species cooperation and innovative problem-solving. The plaque did not mention the rock. I kept that rock, though. It sits on my desk now next to my coffee mug and a photo of Earth. I had a small label made for it. The solution to everything. Because here's the thing about humanity that the rest of the galaxy keeps forgetting. We're good at looking stupid if it works. We don't need our solutions to be elegant or sophisticated or impressive. We need them to solve the problem. And sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to throw a rock at it and see what happens. The other species, with their millions of years of evolution and their countless technological advances, they've forgotten how to be simple. They've forgotten that sometimes the universe doesn't want your quantum mechanics and your dimensional phase shifters. Sometimes it just wants you to show up, use your basic pattern recognition, and try the obvious thing. 3 months after my walk through the rift, Admiral Kirst visited my office. He placed a bottle of what I assumed was Kittilak's alcohol on my desk, which was either a sign of respect or an assassination attempt. With Kirst, it was hard to tell. The military has added a new protocol to our training, he clicked. Before deploying advanced weapons or technology, soldiers must now ask, have we tried throwing a rock at it? They call it the Thornblade Protocol. I'm honored and slightly concerned. You should be both. He turned to leave, then paused. The galaxy needed this lesson, human. We had become too comfortable with complexity. You reminded us that sometimes the old ways work. After he left, I sat back in my chair and looked at my rock. The solution to everything. Simple, direct, and completely effective for the problem it was designed to solve. Somewhere out there, the void rift still swirled, waiting for the next overcomplicated solution to shut down and the next simple approach to welcome through. And somewhere else, probably, there were other problems waiting to be solved by someone willing to look stupid enough to try the obvious answer. I raised my coffee mug in a toast to the rock. Here's to humanity's real superpower, being too dumb to know when something should be complicated. The rock, being a rock, didn't respond. But I like to think it understood.